Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn, and I'm hosting today. And it's Thursday. It's a lovely day here in Sydney, Australia. And I'm very excited to welcome back to Adobe Live, good friend of the show, artist and illustrator, also from Sydney, Jeremy Lord. Hello. How you doing?
Hello, how are you?
I'm
Good to be
good.
back.
It is. It's been
Yeah,
it's been really great. So there's a two-part series, which I'll let you, of course, kind of do a bit of a recap for anyone that has missed out. But I found yesterday's session really interesting and something like quite different to what we normally do here. And I could see from the chat and some people talking about it afterwards as well that lots of people really resonated with it. Because I feel like creating your own font is something that every graphic designer has kind of always really wanted to do. And I think it's
yeah,
always been it's a very deep, like there's people that spend, we were talking about it yesterday, I think there's people that spend their entire career getting really, really good at it. So
yeah.
yeah, it's been a really fun, interesting project.
It has, and I think you're right. Like, it's something that's like it's kind of cool to have your own font, and various projects for various clients might really kind of enjoy having that font, even though potentially they might not necessarily need it. But um, what I was kind of keen to get to, and I think what we've done with yesterday's stream, and hopefully continue today, is something a little bit more accessible, a little bit
Mm.
less like you need to be trained as a typographer. You need to know the programs. You need to know deep, deep, deep lore and knowledge of like type creation and all that kind of stuff to create these fonts. And often I think that can be a little bit discouraging. Whereas this combo of kind of like Photoshop, Illustrator, and this plugin that we're going to look at in a little
Mm.
bit more depth today called Font Self Maker is a little bit more just kind of like, hey, you got some cool drawings, you did whatever you did, just plug them into this thing and make them into a font, and presto, you got a font. So
Yeah.
it's a kind of a fun, accessible thing to do, and I think that's probably going to resonate with people who aren't necessarily like fully committed to being typographers like myself,
Yeah.
but who do have a little bit of an interest in it and who use it in a sort of illustrative or kind of graphic design way. So yeah,
Nice. Yeah. And I think we're going to see it kind of put into practice a little bit. We'll do a bit of a recap. So don't worry if you're watching this and you don't know what we're talking about. We'll switch over. Why don't we switch over now so you can kind of have a look at kind of the letters of the font. So I've got your screen up now, Jeremy, for the audience to
nice.
see. And well, hey, I'll let you do the recap. You do the recap.
Cool. All
We'll do
right.
it for you.
So yeah, so basically we are making a font, as the title suggests. And we started yesterday by kind of looking at what are some of the key things that you need to begin with in order to start this. So obviously, this is a self-brief. I'm just kind of making whatever font I want. This is not for a client. And so in that respect, I needed a brief. So we looked at some inspiration, kind of like what I wanted, what I didn't want, what are some of the characteristics. We also kind of looked at what some of the ways that you can kind of brief yourself. So, and one of the ones that we talked about is kind of like pick a character, like fictional or real, and set some characteristics based on that character that will then allow you to, create a font for it. So in this instance, we used kind of Tyler Durden, kind of rule breaker, a little bit kind of grungy, doesn't really care, super anti-establishment. So we created then a font that was going to kind of, break some of those many, many rules that typography has. So we looked at that. Then we looked at potentially kind of like, you might want to start with a grid and what kind of grid you might go for when you're starting, sort of different kind of templates. Again, not necessarily something that we're doing here because we're doing something that's a little bit more freeform. And then we landed basically on this kind of like very brushy, well, actually not super brushy, not too clean, a little bit of texture, a little bit of a kind of ink splatter, a little bit kind of manic, I guess, a bit more of a scribble than a nice calligraphy. That was the
Mm.
kind of the vibe that I was going for. And so we ended up with these characters that I actually created with a brush in Fresco, which was this brush here called Grungy Inker. So this allowed me to kind of create these characters kind of by hand, if you will, in a like digital way, but definitely kind of, handwriting those kind of characters, importing that into Illustrator to then live trace and ending up with what we kind of see here, which is a bunch of vectors. And then we started kind of talking a little bit about yesterday about kind of what you need to do in order to bring those into the plugin, which lives up here. So this in our extensions is a plugin called Font Self Maker. It's not a free plugin, unfortunately. It is just over $50 Aussie. So I'm not sure what that would equate in your currencies, but yeah, it isn't a free one, unfortunately, but it is pretty powerful and it's super easy to use. So if you're kind of keen to do this, I would really recommend kind of getting into that. So yeah, so this is basically where we kind of left off yesterday, with some kind of main characters, some alternate characters, some lowercase characters, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so let's continue that today, and we're going to look a little bit more into how to kind of fine tune this font, how to add some kind of custom characters, punctuation, ligatures, all this kind of stuff. And then we'll look at creating kind of like a little bit of a specimen to kind of promote this font and kind of put it into context. So that's going to be today.
Awesome. Well, I'll just shout out as everyone's here that if you do have any questions as we're going along, I saw that there were some comments after yesterday's stream that some people are working on their own fonts as well. So feel free to ask questions if you've got them. And I'm sure Jeremy will do his best to answer them as we're going through. And I will nod and smile.
Sweet.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Cool. Okay, so as I said, we once you kind of purchase the plugin and installed it, it goes into your extensions. So Window, Extensions, Font Self Maker, and it opens up like this. And we can just kind of drag these as we kind of saw yesterday. We can select all of these and then just literally click on either uppercase or lowercase and just kind of add them to our font, and it will just import them. It's pretty smart in the sense that as long as they're in alphabetical order and as long as they're in a straight line, you won't have to manually import each one and assign them. It just kind of does them all one by one, and it knows that the A is an A, and then it knows that the D is D, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty kind of pretty easy to use in that sense. But we're also going to just go in. We started kind of doing this yesterday and using a particular font. So I started with kind of this one. So this one here has all of our uppercase and lowercase. Now, this is an uppercase only font. It's an all caps font, but I still created what I kind of call the lowercase, even though structurally each of these letters are still uppercase letters. But it just allows me to then kind of create variations in that text so that I don't necessarily have repeat letters like this. So like NN, if I have a lowercase n and I can go to uppercase, that creates kind of two different characters. So it's a bit of a cheat way to get something, yeah, a little bit of a hack. We can create even more if we want to using what's called alternates, which I'll get into in a little bit of a sec. But effectively, this is where we kind of landed yesterday and just having all of those characters. So we also need to kind of add in a bunch of numbers. So you can see I've got all my kind of lowercase, I've got these duplicates, I have got numbers somewhere, potentially not opened. There we go. So we got some numbers. So we can add all of these in, and we do it in the same kind of way that we kind of looked at previously. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to open the final font that I've been working on, which is not necessarily 100% finished, but it's pretty close. And it has all of these characters embedded into it. So it's got a bunch of punctuation marks that I've created for it, parentheses, asterisks. It's got a set of numbers, and it's got lowercase, it's got a bunch of ligatures, it's got a whole bunch of different things that we can look at today. So this is the finished one. So what you can do as well with this is, obviously I've created this font and I've plopped it in there, but if you have a like legit quote unquote font that you've downloaded, like let's say you want to grunge up a version of Helvetica, you can actually go onto your hard drive here and open up Helvetica onto this, and then make some edits and then save it as your own font. So it's pretty
I'd
cool.
Say that
in
would
that
be the
sense.
easiest way to kind of entry level
Definitely.
if you really want to just muck around with it, right?
Yeah, definitely. As long as you have that font on your drive, obviously you'll be able to kind of type out those characters and work with that. But you'll also be kind of just able to make those edits. Now, the legalities of that, I'm not sure, like if you've just grunged up a Helvetica just a little bit, can you sell it as your own font? That's a bit of a gray area, but it's a nice way to kind of get started into the program itself and kind of have a little bit of an intro to that. But it's also like in this case, obviously, you can keep editing it as you go. You can save it and just kind of reopen it and make constant updates to it. So let's first of all look at, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and this is probably kind of the geekiest we'll get here, and it's one of the fundamental principles of typography, which is letter spacing and kerning. So by default, we've got this sort of thing happening here where we can kind of increase that letter space. Now, this is assigning a set value to everything. We want to be able to edit that manually, and we want this to be a little bit tight, right? So if I have that letter spacing a little bit too big, you'll notice in my kind of real fake text, it doesn't quite have the right vibe. Those letters are too far spaced apart. So I'm going to just drop that down as much as I can to keep it sort of semi-legible. But mostly I'm keen on having something that looks like it kind of holds together as a scribble. And kind of does that. So in doing this, we're kind of assigning a little bit of a value to everything, but there's going to be some characters that are going to work well together and other character combinations that might not work as well as we'd like. So for instance, let's see if I can find a kind of an example here. The U and the N right here, this combo is a little bit too close together. Right? So I can actually go back to my home screen, and I'm going to go and find the N right here. And here I've got three measurements that I'm really kind of looking at. I've got the space after, which is right here. And if you notice, like if you pay attention to this preview above there that we've got, when I kind of drag this out, you'll notice there it is, the N space has gotten bigger. So I can kind of just do this live, which is really kind of fun to do, and manually set this up a little bit. So I wanted just a little bit more space than what I had before, and maybe a little bit more on the other side as well, so that that N has a little bit more room to breathe, and kind of separates from even just the M in front of it. So I can do that. I can also change the height of it. So I can have it be a little bit more wobbly up and down. I can have like a little bit more of a wobble in the line if I want to. So that's just kind of dropping it up and down. So I can do this individually for all these fonts. And one of the things that we mentioned yesterday, which is kind of like the fundamental principles here, is that has more negatives than they're called kern. They need to be kerned accordingly. So like face in that box doesn't generate much negative. Like
I'm actually losing you a little bit. This hasn't happened for a long time on Adobe Live. You're cutting out a little bit there. Let's see if we can fix this live.
Your default microphone has changed and will now be used. Is that better?
Yeah.
Very weird. Okay.
Yeah, it could have been a device trying to come in and out, or I don't know.
Could be.
Else, but sounds good now.
Okay, cool.
Let's just.
Sorry about that.
We'll see if it happens again, but that was good. You're good.
All right.
Good fix.
All right. Okay, so basically what I'm talking about here is if we put the T just kind of like right to the edge of that design, there's a lot of white space on either side. So we need to compensate for that by bringing those lines in a little bit so that that kind of shrinks the space and it allows a letter to kind of overlap onto that. And if we look at our preview here, which is right there, there's our T and our U. If I kind of leave that as such, we get a bit of a white gap in there. And this is a problem for what we call this kind of like typographic gray. And what that kind of means is if you think about what happens when you print gray on a printer, for instance, there's no gray ink in a printer. It's just black. And what it does in order to create gray is just put little dots of black further or closer together to create a darker or a lighter gray, right? So effectively what you see when you look at this is just a bunch of kind of like black shapes. The further I spread them apart, the lighter that kind of illusion of gray happens. But if I have a white gap in the middle of that, it kind of breaks that unity a little bit. So I don't want that. So I want a nice kind of even kind of space so that everything looks like it's even though mathematically speaking, it isn't, right? I'm assigning a different kerning value to each of these characters individually so that they look like they're even. And that's the key, right? It's all about what it looks like, not about what it kind of actually is behind the engine, if you will. So that's going to be a little bit of time to kind of go through each character combo and kind of do that live. I can also kind of do a little bit of a test up here and try this out, right? So this is giving me just a kind of like a garbage preview using real words, but like there's nothing actually that makes sense here. Or I can start typing my own text to see what's going to happen when I type these out, right? So here we can see, okay, cool. I'm starting to see that's not too bad. I'm liking where that's going. We've got a lot of O's here, so we can change one of these ones to uppercase O, and maybe we can change this T to an uppercase T. And so it just gives me a little bit more variety, makes it look a little bit more real. Or I can add in what's called an alternate character. So what we're going to do here basically is I'm going to go in and I have somewhere hidden in the bowels of my work, I have got an alternate R here, right there, because what I kind of discovered when I started kind of using this is the R that I did create, which is somewhere, I've already kind of changed it anyways. This R right here that I originally had too long of a tail, and it kind of created this little bit of a problem. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to go in and kind of find that alternate character that I did, and I believe it was lowercase r. There it is. And I'm just going to go in here with that R selected, and I'm going to hit lowercase r and go on create glyph. Now it's going to tell me you've already got that character. So either I can replace it or I can create an alternate. So if I replace it, obviously it's going to replace it with this one, which kind of stuck out a little bit too much. It kind of broke the overall feeling. So I can actually just say, I just want to create an alternate. And then I can change it up, right? So I needed it to be a little bit more kind of crossing the baseline a little bit. And it's just Alt-1 is what it says. So I'm going to save this font now. We're going to leave that as is. And now when I go back into advanced into that preview, if I highlight this, that's lowercase r, hello, it should. It should give me a, okay. Interesting.
Might need to reload it or something.
It might be that. There should be a little pop-up that comes next to it that says you can choose an alternate R. There it is.
I saw it.
Yeah. It's a little bit tricky. There it is. Bang. So I can just click on that. So what happens is obviously what happens here will also happen in Illustrator. So once you highlight that character, you can assign a bunch of different alternates to these characters, and you can just select them like so and just kind of swap them up, having a hard time with my words, swap them out on the fly with that. So you can actually create in that way, because I've got an uppercase R, a lowercase r, both that are different. I can create a third variant or even a fourth and a fifth, as many R's as I want to kind of design for this, and load them all in as alternates. And I'll have a range of different alternates ready to go in here.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So yeah, again, like obviously you just need to put in the work to kind of make those and increase this sense of kind of hand drawness of this font, and get rid of those duplicates that are a dead giveaway that it is a font. But yeah, there's a bunch of different ways that you can kind of do that. Now, with that kind of same idea, what we can kind of do as well is some characters. Let me just go into Photoshop and kind of demonstrate that a little bit. We're going to create a new layer. Some characters, like for instance, lowercase f and lowercase I, create these kind of kerning nightmares, if you will, where if you kind of imagine that these are, again, kind of what we look at when we talk about kind of movable type, if these kind of fit inside of a metal block that's going to be used as the stamp, we're going to have a hard time getting these to look like they're properly spaced out. Because if I move that too close in to fill in this gap, then I'm going to have a clash up here where the dot of the I and the F, and that's going to be a little bit of a nightmare. So what we do instead of that is we create something called a ligature. And if you can kind of test this out if you write something like this. One of the kind of common words for testing fonts is this weird hamburger fonts, or in this case, we'll do fions. And it just kind of, it has uppercase, it has, sorry, ascenders, descenders, so like letters that go up, letters that go below. It's got round letters, straight letters, wide letters, so much. So it's a good kind of like litmus test for this. But what you'll notice is what I've done here is I've kind of done my F and my I in the same stroke. And that is what's called a ligature. So typographers, in order to get around this like horrible thing of like, we can't do this, they've just combined the two into one. And that is an F and an I ligature, which is one of the more sort of common ones. But we can do this in font self here, and I can create these characters that are repeat characters that often kind of show up in the English language. So double E, double F, and so on and so forth. Because what might happen is I might have a double E, and in this case, I've already kind of created that character. So let me go in and find that character and delete it. There we go. It's right here. My double E ligature, delete glyph. There we go. And I'm going to go back in here, select all, and just type in E. So that's a bit of a problem, right? We've got a dead giveaway that this is a kind of a font. So I could just make this an uppercase E. Cool. That's kind of nice. But I'm not sure how well these are kerned. They're a little bit of a pain. They're not kind of working super well together. I'd have to edit them, but if I edit the E specifically for the E, then it might not work anymore with another F or with a G. I kind of like might throw it out with other characters. So instead of doing that, I'm going to go back into here and I'm going to select this guy, and I'm going to literally just type in what do you want to type in to have that character appear? And I'm just going to go EE. And then I'm going to say create ligature. And it's going to ask me, do you want a standard ligature or do you want a discretionary ligature enabled by user on demand? We just want a standard one. We don't want to mess around. We just go with standard. And there we go. It's added in that special character. So now when the program realizes that I've typed in a double E, it will stop making this, and you'll notice that my first E will change as soon as I put in the second one. It'll go to my standard character. So this actually ligatures count as a character. And if we go into Illustrator actually, and I'm going to go into my type tool, and I'm just going to go with that. That's fine. And I'm going to go to type glyphs. You'll see all of these kind of special weird characters. They're all known as characters, and we should have, there we go, there's one ligature. Here's a bunch of other ligatures. So FFJ, FFL, FI, IJ, all of these are standalone characters. They're not two characters. So we can kind of do this with a bunch of different things. And in this instance, as you see, I've done that with all of a bunch of different kind of letters that come up on their own. So this is super fun to do, and you can kind of, go to town a little bit more with this with double O. So we got O, and we've got uppercase O. But if I do double O, you'll see that I've now got 4 different types of that kind of character, because I've kind of created those specifically for that. So it's kind of fun to use in that way, and we can kind of just create those ligatures in exactly the way that you saw. So that's a kind of a nice way to go with doing that. Now, I haven't actually created accents. That's my next thing to do on this. And with accents, we're not going to do this today because it would take a little bit of time, but the process behind that would be where are we going? I've got a bunch of alternates here that I kind of didn't show that, but we are going to go and look at where we're right here. Punctuation, there we go. So we got all of our punctuation. I've created these accents in here. So we got a accent, like a left. These are all just kind of, I know the names in French, but I don't want to get into it. We've got an umlaut, we've got a tilde, we've got all the kind of different accents. So what I would do here basically is I would just reuse these accents in a way that's going to make sense. I would just take this A, copy it, bring it into my punctuation, and just stick that A in there underneath one of these accents, and then I could just reuse the characters. So I'm just reusing those accents, and then I need to group these together and then bring them in as a glyph. So I need to know how to type in A with an accent or E with an accent. So in order to do that, what I've actually done is I've created just like a common specimen kind of type sheet for that, so that I can then just go highlight that, copy it, and paste it into my thing here, so I don't have to figure out the keyboard shortcut for it.
Right.
And it's also a nice thing to go like, oh, you know what? I'm missing a euro sign or a yen sign, or, oh man, I didn't do my copyright or my trademark, like any of those kind of things. Obviously, if you're doing something like this, you know, how quote unquote legit do you want that font to be? How many of these actual characters and glyphs do you want? As you saw, there's a ton of these glyphs that you could design in here. Like, are you really going to go in and design all of these? Some of them are pretty obscure. We got Cyrillic, we got a whole bunch of different things in here. So, you know, you might not go full hog and design all of these, but the more common ones are the ones that we've kind of got here that I've created. So we can kind of just keep adding to this list. Now, this is where I think there's a little bit more kind of fun that you can have with this. I have also created some little extra illustrations, and these are going to sit inside kind of like a very kind of a video game way. And the idea for this font came from the video game Skate or Die, which is an old 90s video game, 80s maybe even. Let me know if you know the release date in chat, but we're going to put in some kind of like cheat codes or like Easter eggs into this font that will create illustrations when you type in a specific thing, right? So for instance, if I type in the word skull with a 5, right? So right now you can see it's doing that, but as soon as I put in that second L, it's going to change to this little skull thing that I had. Right, so this is literally the same process that I've done all of my other characters. I've just taken this and I've gone into here and I've just typed in what I want you to do, like what's the code for that particular kind of letter. And it will just create that glyph.
It's like a keyword. So you could do skull 1, skull 2, skull 3, right?
Totally.
Awesome. That's cool.
You just need to be aware that obviously I've done skull with the letter 5 here because I don't want that to happen when you start typing in skull with full letters. I want that to just kind of stay the word. So I need to make it stuff that people aren't likely to type in kind of quote unquote normal text. So here you see I've got 5 cowl. Where's my other one? I've got S0D, so skate or die, but I don't want that to be SOD because that is a word that somebody might type. So we're kind of hiding these into our script here And then we got skate, and that's going to create a little skateboard and so on and so forth. So there's lots of kind of like fun stuff. These are not obviously not very useful, but they're nice little kind of like Easter eggs and things that you can add into there. Now there is a limitation to this. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking.
No, I can't actually.
There is a limitation to this. As I said, I think I mentioned this yesterday. I've done this one instead of this one, because watch what happens when I try and bring that one in is, let's say I'm going to say, I don't know, we got 55 KUL. That's going to be the thing that I'm going to create for this. And I'm going to go and create ligature. This morning, it was giving me an error message and it wasn't doing it. And now it's doing it. Okay, cool.
Basically, what was the error message?
The error message was there's too much stuff here. There's too many elements in this. There's too much kind of going on for me to make a character. So there is a limit in this app to how much info you can have in one single character and how many kind of little kind of scraps and scribbles. So if I added like lots of splattering to this, it would probably kind of flash me this message saying, sorry, I that's just too much to compute to put into it. So yeah, a little bit kind of finicky. And you can see it wasn't doing it this morning and now it's doing it. Go figure.
Of course.
But yeah, I've added in a bunch of those kind of like hidden characters. So for instance, we've got a big kind of quadruple X here, does this big kind of like nope. And we've got the little skateboard and skater die. So we've got all of our characters and everything. We didn't make accents and everything kind of going in. But this is our font pretty much ready to go. And we're just going to save that right here. Hang on, we've got a missing font. We got a missing character here. You can also, if you're kind of keen, you can make one of these kind of glyphs something that happens whenever you type a character that you haven't created, right? So you can replace this with a specific thing that shows up as a different kind of thing that just says, I don't have that character. Unfortunately, in this app, you have to do it manually. You have to literally go in and type in that character, that kind of illustration, for every single character that you haven't done. There are ways of changing that default, but you can't do it through this app. So we won't get into it too much.
Okay, cool.
So now we've got our font ready to go. I can go in and save it. I'm not sure why it has deleted one of my characters in here, but whatever, that doesn't matter. We can solve that later. I'm going to go in and save that font. I already did that. And I can then go in and install it. So I'm a little bit old school. On a Mac, you can just double click on that font and it will open it up and you hit install and it will install. Yeah. I like to do it the old-fashioned way where I'm going to go onto my desktop and I'm going to open that up into a different tab. There we go, and I go and find my Mac HD. There we go, library.
Find your font folder?
Fonts folder, yeah. And I just this the old school in me just likes to do this kind of manually. And I'm going to duplicate that into here. I've already got it in here, so I'm going to say stop. But yeah, again, it's probably easier just to click install, but I don't know, something about kind of dragging and dropping in there just makes me feel like I've got more control over what fonts I'm putting in and kind of taking out.
Fair enough.
It's, yeah, the Matrix has Unio, so we're going to do it that way. Now we can kind of start typing.
Does it still install it in Fontbook if you do it that way?
Good question. Probably not. So it's probably not the best way to do this, but
I feel like if you double click and install, it'll definitely be in Fontbook because that's what it does. And then
I'm pretty sure that you're 100% right with that. And my doing it is not necessarily the correct way of doing it or the smartest way of doing it. But
you do you. Yeah. I'm the same. My old bones just react, do things a certain ways, and I cannot be changed. So I get it.
Yep. So next step, now that we've got our working font, as you can see here, this is a live font. I can start kind of typing random stuff and it will start kind of doing that for me. So I can just kind of keep going in there. So that font is now selectable from my drop down. You can see I've got that skate or die font in there, and it is a custom font. And there we go.
It's pretty cool. Just a quick question.
Yeah.
As we've got to this point, we haven't left Illustrator yet. Does it work only in Illustrator, or does it work as a font in other applications?
It should work as a font in other applications. Try it out in Photoshop real quick.
Yeah.
There it is, and it works in Photoshop. So
nice.
Basically what this exports as when you save it, if I go back into my folder here, you can see this is an OTF file, so open typeface, which is compatible with basically anything that you want. So as long as it's installed on your hard drive, it's like any other font, which should work in pretty much any app that supports that format, which is, I think, every app really. So it should potentially work in a bunch of other kind of programs as well. So now what we're doing is we're kind of creating a little bit of a specimen. So this is where we're going to kind of test out that font, start playing around with it, putting it in context. So I've got on one sheet here, I've got all of my uppercase, all of my lowercase, all kind of in a line. I've got a little bit of a thing. So like this is not a font. So this is all live fonts. Now what I've done with this one is I've kind of started messing around a little bit with the placement of this using the direct type tool. So normally I'd be in here, and I'm just going to go into the touch type tool. And this allows me to just kind of mess around with each of these characters and kind of place it a little bit better. Now, again, yesterday we kind of spoke a little bit about like, well, if your goal is to make it look like it's done by hand, just do it by hand and you've got full control and all of your characters are different and it looks like it's done by hand because it is done by hand. Yes, 100%. But you might not necessarily have the skills to do this, although, I mean, obviously if you've created this font, then you have the skills to create this font and hand letter it yourself. But effectively we can just kind of start messing around with this and make a composition here that works in a way that we're going to kind of individually kern all of these and kind of work around that to create something that's going to hold together well. And this is one of the things that's really important, I think, with typography is the shape of a word. So if we're looking back at our extension here and we go back into advanced, what's the physical kind of shape? Like if you were to grab that word, is there stuff hanging out? Is it too sharp? Is it too round? Is it too wobbly? Like, is it a pleasing shape? So some words have nicer, kind of more complementary shapes than others. So for instance, like the example that I always use is, unfortunately, my name in lowercase is a little bit of a bad shape because we've got kind of down, straight, down. Like we need something to go up. We need something to kind of balance that out a little bit. So it's not a great shape of a word. And this is important because a lot of brands like Coca-Cola and McDonald's, where their logo types, like their logo is a word, that shape of that word is really what's allowing you to read that word and kind of identify it immediately. So this is kind of important. And so doing this properly is going to kind of work to our advantage. But we've got all the rest of our characters in here. We're kind of playing around. So I'm going to start kind of bringing this into some context. And in the spirit of this font, being kind of like a skatey kind of font, I am going to use this image. It's kind of like a screenshot, old video, old skate video of some guy doing like a massive gap, huge set of stairs that he's clearing.
My knees hurt.
Your knees hurt, your back hurts, everything hurts looking at that. And I'm just going to bring this into Illustrator right here. You could do this in Photoshop if you wanted to as well, but I'm actually going to flip this around horizontally as well. By the way, if you didn't know, holding down Alt does both sides at the same time. So it's a good way to just kind of flip your image, or you could just reflect it. It's up to you, but I find it kind of faster to do it this way. And I'm going to lock this, and I'm going to start typing in some text here with my types. I'm going to go big or go home. So
I choose go home.
Yeah. In this instance, probably a wise call.
In this case.
Yep. I'm going to change the color of this to kind of something that's got a little bit more like pop to it, so it stands out on that black and white image. And now I can start kind of messing around with some of these characters, right? So I had some alternates. If I had more alternates, I could kind of select these characters in that way and kind of change them up. But I've got a bunch of O's here, so I'm going to say, okay, go that one. That's an uppercase. Maybe, whoops, no, you're an uppercase. We want probably this one. So again, like you can start to see, I've got like 4 O's in this text. So it's a good kind of test to see like just how identifiably identical these are. But it's a nice kind of, still getting a little bit of a nice vibe happening in here. And then we can start to kind of mess around a little bit more with our touch type tool. So Shift T, and then bringing those kind of over here. Oops. There we go. That's going to live in the corner up there. I could vectorize this at this stage as well and just kind of use it in that way.
Yeah, why is it behaving in that way where they're kind of pushing each other's letter out of the way?
Okay, so this is because if I do this, it should... So this is basically saying like anything after the character, I think, it can be done individually. But any character that's before needs to follow. So I think it holds, if I do the O here, the H should stay, but the ME should go with it. Oh, it's doing it in the opposite way. Yeah, again, good question. Time for another stream maybe, but
yeah, okay, cool.
I'm not exactly sure what the kind of the mathematics and the inner workings of it is here. But it's a kind of a nicer way to edit this. Or we could even just kind of go back in and say, actually, I just want to keep this on its own text, so I can edit it on its own as well. So go big, there we go, same color. And now I can kind of start messing around with this a little bit more and kind of place it. I can increase the size of it a little bit, and I can start messing around with this composition in a much kind of more comprehensive way, working towards that. Okay, and that's pretty much the go for this.
Nice. I mean, you're talking about situations before, like, obviously as an illustrator, you've got your stylus in front of you and you're editing. Of course, you could get down there and just custom do it each time. But it's also interesting, like when we talk about situations where, like, you're not going to lug your Wacom to an office for a client, right? Or we talk about doing something in the studio, and it's like, well, you've got this giant Wacom in your particular case, or you might have, you might be, have an iPad, but then it's not connecting to in the sort of way that you want it to like a client's machine or where you are. Like, you might not have it. So I can see situations where it'd be pretty cool to kind of set something like this up, particularly if you're working on like a campaign or something like that. I can see it being super valuable. Like, even how you're just writing this, I was like, oh, you're going to make it graffiti. Like, that makes heaps of sense. You could quickly make graffiti if you're making like environments or like backgrounds to something, or like, imagine if you were doing like an illustrated book or something and there was like lots of city stuff. You could see there being a lot of value in being able to do that.
100%. And like, maybe you do something like this. I've had this comment before where I've done, a bit of custom type for a client like this, where like, we were talking about this, like if you were doing this maybe a little bit more smartly, and if you had that kind of skill set, potentially you would just do this by hand, right? And then you've got full control where everything goes. You've got full kind of variables that can kind of come into this as well. So it would make more sense to kind of do this by hand. If this is the result that I was looking for specifically, I would probably just do this by hand and not make a font. But I have had this thing happen before where a client kind of looks at this and goes like, hey, cool, can we have the font for this? Not understanding that it's a custom piece of type and it's not a font. So in cases like this, you could just go like, yeah, sure, here it is. And then you've added a lot of value for your client to be able to kind of use that font and create other stuff like this on their own.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And so, yeah, again, like, I mean, we could keep doing this for quite a while. Like, again, we've got like, let's take Tyler here, make a new layer, bang. And type in that quote from the movie.
I was like, what's the quote? Couldn't remember it.
So we could just literally just kind of pop that in there.
Yeah.
And it kind of creates some interesting stuff. And we could also like make it a little bit more scripty and kind of add a little bit of an angle to it, right? So it really just kind of looks like it kind of matches that kind of tilt there. So there's a lot that you could kind of do with stuff like this. And again, the more kind of fonts you create for this, the more characters you create for this, the less kind of obvious it's going to be that this is a repeated font. And so, obviously a little bit more work for you, but we've got a ton of different things that we can kind of do with our text here. That's going to add to this and kind of fit that vibe. It's quite cool. And like, could be, skater font, could be a kind of more kind of comic font, could be a super kind of grungy font. We could reduce the line height in here to kind of really squeeze it in and make it kind of difficult to read, reduce the tracking even more to make it even more kind of compact. And then we could come in and add some kind of like spatters to this as well. So that's on a black, but you can kind of see like, we can kind of add that in. Just add in kind of like a bunch of texture, but that's a little bit kind of on the side to this font. And that's just kind of helping kind of sell the idea and the vibe of this font for somebody who might want to pay for it and download it.
I just realized like another huge value would be for animators, or if you're trying to do some movable type in After Effects or Premiere Pro, like, because I just realized with this clip, like you could, it's not an app for drawing, that kind of thing, like having, Wacom and like drawing and doing it custom each time. But there'll be a really great way to bring stuff in. And then because you're animating vectors, right? Like you could, I'm sure they're originally vectors. So I know it's a font, but I'm sure you could vectorize them within After Effects or Premiere, and then you could do some really cool animations with the type.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. It's just like having the option to have this as a live font potentially saves you and your client a little bit of work, even though like in terms of customization, as I said, if I was doing this by hand, it would be full custom. It would fit perfectly with this image. It would have a little bit more kind of shape to it. It would probably be better designed, have a little bit more kind of like texture and flavor to it. But effectively, if the client's like, oh, can we change it from go big or go home to like go big or go packing or whatever, then effectively that illustrator has to redraw that whole thing. And maybe the client doesn't have the budget for that. Maybe they don't have the time or the, kind of the effort. Having this as a font means that they can do it themselves. How well they'll do it themselves is another question for another time, but the possibility is there because it is a live editable font.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's really cool. I really enjoyed that. Something very different. It works really well, doesn't it? There as like this kind of what's the word? I'm going to lose my. It's
almost like
design.
a speech bubble a little bit.
Yeah, there's like a particular word for it, I think. Where it's like the avant-garde kind of thing where it looks like a microphone, but it's the typography, like making the shape of the thing that it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's a word for it.
Yeah.
There goes my advanced diploma in graphic design.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love I think, something we spoke about either this session or the previous session was just around having the variety in there. And I think without the variety, it would make it less appealing to have it if it was just always exactly the same. But as you're building it, being able to have like uppercase and lowercase as a really easy, quick switch as you're going, and then also having the alternates as well, I think solve kind of the thoughts in the back of my head of why it could be a hindrance. But yeah, like look how quickly you can kind of create this sort of stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And we talk so much about creating non-destructively as well. And there'd be so many situations where having it as a font, and the one you mentioned before, and I'm sure many others, where it would be so useful. Like imagine if you did this for a client and then 2 months later they said, oh, we really liked it, that kind of social media card you made for us, or the display ad or the poster or something. We actually want to turn it into a series, but with different colors and in different languages or something. Different languages, will take that out of the way. Actually, that won't work. But like different colors or with different, like apply it to these different brands for these different cities or something. Like maybe it said something to do with the city you were in or the street you were on or something. Then suddenly you've set yourself up for, not having to hand do everything. It's really cool.
Totally.
I can see it.
Yeah. So again, like it's that trade-off of like, do you have it as a font or do you have it as a piece of custom text? The purist in me would be like, make a custom text. But there's definitely case scenarios where this is just smarter to have. And as you said, non-destructive, editable, future-proof maybe a little bit as well. And just also kind of like lower barrier to entry, I think.
Yeah. And I can also see it like, how often like a client will look at your work and say, can we have something like that? Like maybe just doing a quick mock-up to be like, yeah, it could look something like this. I'm like, damn, he works really fast.
Yeah.
But then you save time. Maybe they do the pitch and maybe it's not what they want, but you've kind of done it much faster. You've done like a couple of, sort of thumbnails for them really quick. Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, totally. It's just like, this is what I mean by like less scripty, more scribbly. It's like this font.
Right.
Done.
Right.
Yeah.
Saves you a bit of time.
Yeah,
amazing. Well, thank you, Jeremy, as always, for joining us on Adobe Live. Let's do it
Pleasure.
More often this year than we have so far, because it's the first time you've been on all year. And that's not good enough. We got to have.
That's good though. It's given me time to like come up with some new things and discover new kind of concepts to bring to you guys, and not sort of rehash kind of things that we've done before. So definitely excited to do more of these and come to you guys with some more content like this for sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for watching live and watching on demand. And we'll be back next week with some more Adobe Live Asia Pacific. Thanks again, Jeremy.
Thanks, man. See you.
See you, everyone. Bye.